Right, I think we'll make a start. I think if people come along, they can park themselves, can't they? So, well, firstly, welcome, thank you for coming. I suspect most of you won't have been in this space before. This is over the course of actually last summer, during the height of all of the pandemic weirdness, we received some funding from the university to convert this space, and so did our best to produce something that was sort of as flexible as was sensibly possible, so we can do sort of group work. We've got all the technology set up, and there's enough space in here that we want to do stuff. And hopefully, touch wood, one of the things we're aiming at is over time, a lot more of our spaces will look more like this than rows of desks, because it's just more pleasant to work in. So what I'm going to do today is, well, actually, let's do the sensible thing and actually use my slides. So I'm going to talk for maybe 45 minutes. I'll be perfectly honest, this is the first time we've done this session, so 45 minutes is me having a wild stab at how long that's going to be, we shall see. And then what the idea is that then I'll just show you what we've got and then go knock yourself out. I'll be around till 1 o'clock. You're welcome to park yourself here and have a go with anything if you've got questions. Wander off and get a coffee, you know, help yourself. I won't be deeply offended if you're not all still here by 1 o'clock. Equally, if you go, this is brilliant, I want to carry on, we can do that. Next up, why are you doing that? That's more like it. So, a little bit of background about this. Psychology here has a very long history of research using virtual reality. Way back in 1995, we had a new, I'm welcoming you two for, and we had a new head of school who was interested in using virtual reality for rehabilitation for patients who'd had neurological injuries. And actually, this room was our original virtual reality lab, because back in those days, you needed an awful lot of space to do it, and things like stupidly large screens, hence the fact we've got the mad screen in here. And actually, we still have the original to see you trying to get the head out. This is the original virtual reality headset from 1996, which we actually looked up the price of. 1996 was £12,000, which I did the calculator thing this morning. The equivalent of that today is 24,000. And the thing with this is, it's ridiculously expensive, but if you just feel that, imagine having that on your head for more than 5 minutes. It's very unpleasant. Very, very low resolution as well. So not only was it extremely heavy, but gave you motion sickness in about 5 minutes. Really the knock-on of that is that although we did some really interesting research 20 plus years ago with this stuff, it was almost limited to academic researchers, maybe the odd PhD student. But we've now hit a sweet spot with the technology that you'll find on your desk one of these, which is the equivalent of that. However, I should say with these, clearly had to be plugged into a very powerful computer for 1996 at the other end of it, and needed a programmer to work it. These, on the other hand, you'll notice no wires, all the computing is in it, and as opposed to the £12,000 that was in 1996, 350 quid. So suddenly it becomes a much more viable thing to be doing. So that's part of the background. But actually, I think then the driver for this is that the university, at the beginning of this academic year, have signed a 10-year deal with a company called EON Reality to provide us with the software platform for virtual reality. Because part of the problem always in the past was lovely if you had this gear, but you needed to be paying a programmer to produce anything on it. Touch wood, we now have the technology where we can do that for ourselves, and it starts to free up all sorts of things you can do with it. I'll come to this a bit later on, and you've got on your desks, you'll find there are iPads that have got this software on already. The laptops have got the software on it as well. The EON, the company we get this from, have an app for iPhones, for Android, for Windows and for Macs, which you can download and use. You'll get, as being part of here today, an account on the system, which allows you not just to view stuff, but to add stuff and upload stuff and edit stuff on there as well. So you can have an experiment yourself, and I'll show you a bit more of that. Let's go on one. So, actually worth saying firstly, because this is slightly confusing, because I think we're all quite used to slick, very well developed software. This stuff is evolving very rapidly. So there's two versions. Hi, come in. Just grab a seat and just log yourself on. There are two versions of this. If you're accessing it on a PC or a Mac, it's done via a web browser. The URL's on there, but I'll throw that up on the screen later on. You can have a go of it. But what it does is there is a little bit of software that it downloads to drive itself, which if you do it at home, it will want you to download once when you do it. So you'll start off, and then at some point it will say you need to download this. You'll do that once and it will work. For the iPhone, iPad, Android apps, it will just run on the app. I'll give you a password. You'll get into a system which looks, says he trying to do too many things at once, like this. So you'll get all sorts of things that are already loaded on the system. Let me show you in a bit of reality what this looks like. Hopefully that'll work, yes. So if I go into the EON app, I'll sign in as me. Desperately trying to remember what my password is for this one. No, clearly not that. Yes, that's more like it. So there we go. You get all sorts of, you'll get a sort of selection of things that were already on the system. And for example, if I hit that one, start, and you'll see that's the room that we're currently in, of a picture I took earlier on. If I switch it off so it's not, you can scroll around it. And it lets you do things like, you can see you can add labels onto things, you can add multiple choice questions, you can add links to videos. So you could have a picture of a screen, you click it and a video plays. So, and that was done in here. So then that's me taking a picture, uploading it, adding it onto the system. If I come back, and there are, as you can see, there are already loads of things already loaded on here. But I think the thing which is particularly interesting for us as psychologists is that you can use this to create new content as well. Now, clearly, you'll imagine for the whole university signing up for this, departments like engineering, for example, this is a brilliant thing because they can just do a 3D scan of some complicated bit of engineering, label it, and the students can look at it in virtual reality. For us, you know, you might immediately go, well, what about a 3D model of a brain? But you can download those off, you know, iTunes quite easily. But I think the really intriguing thing for us is this idea that we can now create our own content for these things. And it's, and I'll show you some of the, well, actually, I can show you on here, can't I? You can do a whole range of things. So, for example, if you see down the bottom of the screen there, it says Library, My Workspace and Create. If I hit Create, it's asking me, what do you want to do? Do you want to do something that's a 3D image? Do you want something that's a 360-degree still image? There's also, the thing which says Sketchfab on there, is the equivalent of 3D clip art files, you know, the sort of thing you used to get in Word. There are huge numbers of pre-existing things which are done, you can download and edit to your heart's content. You can also upload your own content, and one of the things I'm going to go on to show you is that we've got 360-degree cameras, and we've also got a set of iPad Pros that have 360-degree scanners, or 3D scanners, I should say, built into them. And you can essentially you can take an image, so I could take a picture of this room now, upload it straight into here. So if I go back and look at some of the things I've already done, let's have a look, my jobs. So these are things I've done recently. So for example, let's open that one. Build lesson. Just label that something for a moment so it works. It's going to ask me to do that, isn't it? There we go. So this is a 3D scan of this room. Clearly a very rough one because I did this quickly so you get a sense of it. And again, you can go into that, you can label things, you can add video, you can add audio content. And equally, let's go back to some of my other stuff that I've got on here. Create. What else have I got? Oh yeah, well actually here's another one that I think is quite interesting. Build. Now, one of the other things that is quite interesting in terms of potential broader uses for this, some of you may know that every year we run a sort of pop-up museum of the history of psychology at UEL. And last year I did a 3D scan of it just to see what worked. But again, you see, you could do this. Each one of those things could be labelled, could have a video attached to it explaining what it is. And I think the nice thing about this stuff is that it's now accessible to us. You don't need programming skill anymore to be able to do this stuff. And the idea really of today is to just give you a sense of what's available, with the idea that then you can think about how it might be applied. I'll be perfectly honest, my knowledge of this started less than a year ago. And my view of this now is that this is a really interesting technology that is just about to become mainstream. And my guess is that in 5 years' time, it's very unlikely that you're going to be doing PowerPoint presentations. It's much more likely that you're going to be doing presentations in virtual reality, or more likely something called augmented reality, but I'll come to that in a moment. But really, the reason I'm really keen that we get you engaged with this stuff is that actually, in 5 years' time, this stuff is going to be mainstream. It's already starting to pop up in areas now. But if you can get out in front of it, hell of a useful skill to have. And also, some of it, quite frankly, is just mainstream skills. For instance, you'll see on each of your desks there's a weird sort of thing on a stick, which is a 360-degree camera. They are standard issue for every estate agent in the country. If you see the tours of houses on estate agents' websites, they are shot with not just cameras like that, with those cameras. Now, that sounds slightly trivial, but that's a useful skill. And actually, there are a lot of applications for that beyond just estate agents. So, onwards a bit. I've talked about some of that already, haven't I? In the you can do different things. So there are what it calls 3D assets, which are digital renderings of real life objects. Now, there are two versions of getting those. One is that Sketchfab is sort of the click art thing for this, and you'll find on there loads of pre-existing 3D models that you can import. But equally, as I say, these iPads have got 3D scanners built into them, so you can scan an object yourself and upload it onto here. 360-degree assets are the things I've already talked about, 360-degree cameras, and as I say, Sketchfab is really just sort of the clip art version of that. Have I just done that? That'll be that. So let's give you a little bit of a sense of what... Oh, I've gone the wrong way. Hold on, back. Start again. Where was I? Just there. That's more like it. So, in terms of making your own content, which I think for us is the interesting part of this, there are two versions. So 3D assets and 360 assets. So 3D assets, the first one on there, is using these things as a 360 scanner. The best way to imagine this, if you imagine you use a photocopier at the moment, you put a one-dimensional thing on a sheet, or a two-dimensional thing even, on a sheet of paper, on a sheet of glass, and you see a light go across the bottom of it. It scans it. These things do exactly the same as that for 3D objects. LiDAR is a system where these fire out very short bursts of laser, comes back, and it can measure the distance it's gone and produces a 3D scan. Now, the intriguing thing is that, again, in the same way that the helmets, the VR helmets have now become a sensible price, the pro versions of recent Apple products, so iPad Pros and iPhone Pros from I think the iPhone 12 onwards, have got these scanners built into them. Now, they use them at the moment just to improve the quality of photos because it can tell exactly how far away you are. But there are free apps which will let you scan something in 3D. So this is the one that we've been using at the moment, a thing called Scaniverse, that works very much, looks like you're using a camera app, so it's not very complicated. Let me give you a quick demo of what it looks like. So if I stick him back on there, and stick that on there, I think this will work. It's a bit of brave use of the technology here. Switch that back over to here. So if I go into the app for Scaniverse, it looks much like any other sort of app. It gives you a library of things you've already done. So there's that scan of this room that I did, that I'd uploaded. But if I go down to the bottom where it says new scan, you can see it's giving me a picture of something already. It's asking me range there. Now, the reason for that is if I wanted to scan the whole of this room, 5 meters is quite sensible. If I want to do a scan of that helmet, 5 meters is a bit ridiculous. So I shall, because it would be getting all the background, so I shall cut it down a bit. And if I just hit record, you'll see these sort of red hash marks. But as I move round, they start to disappear. Round the back. That's it. Once you've done the bit you want, stop. It does a bit of processing then. This is the bit that's the heavy duty computing going on that, you know, none of us want to know how it actually works. And you've then got a 360-degree scan of that object. Now, the intriguing thing here, save, but you've then got an option down the bottom there, share. And it will let you export that. You won't know at the moment, but the standard file format for these things is that one in the middle called GLB. And you can export it straight into your EON app. And then you've got that you can edit, you can label, you can do what you like with. So that's the 3D scanning version of it. Now, in terms of the practicalities of this, we've got half a dozen of these which you can use. If you do happen to have an iPhone Pro, you can just download it onto your phone. I've got an inordinately weird collection of things I've just passed in the street and gone, I'll just do that. Because it's quite interesting as sort of the future of these things. One of the demonstrations of this that I saw from the company, because clearly you would imagine that EON are a very big technology company. They are sort of window dressing their business by giving it away free to universities. But in practice, they sell this system to a lot of heavy duty engineering companies and the like. But one of the intriguing things about it, put my slides back on, is that you can do things like you can 3D scan something. You can then share that with somebody on the other side of the world and look at it together. All sorts of interesting possibilities of what might be possible there. So, actually you can see from the examples I did here, you can do room size scans as well as, you know, small objects. And frankly, I suspect for psychological applications, the room size application scan is probably more interesting. But you can imagine, for example, if you were talking about fine arts, being able to scan small objects, really useful thing to be able to do. So that's 3D material. The other half of it is photographed material. So, what's that? And let me get my example camera. So these things. There's one of these on each of your desks, and you can have a go with it. These are the industry standard 360 digital cameras. They're actually essentially just normal digital cameras, but they've got a lens on the front and on the back, and then they do a bit of elaborate software to stitch the two 180 images together. Let me just plug this in for a second and I'll show you what it does. So if I stand that in the middle of the room, where's my iPad? Go back to there. So, slightly different app this time, the one called Theta. Just connect it to the camera. Hopefully that will pick that up. Camera list, that's the one I want. Come on. Camera list. Trying to connect to the wrong camera, that's why it's not doing it. Yes, there we are. So, if I stick that over there, you can now see I've got on my screen what's the viewfinder on that camera at the moment. So if I do that, I'm looking at this room. And this works just like a camera app. So at the moment, this is on still cameras. If I hit the shutter button, that's taken a still image. And again, in exactly the same way, those can be exported straight into EON. The thing which is intriguing about this, and I'll be perfectly honest, my hope is that you can think of an application for this, because I've thought of one, but I suspect there are a lot more. These cameras will also record 360-degree video. Now, what's intriguing is that the EON platform at the moment isn't set up to process 360-degree video content. If nothing else, because 360-degree video is very big files you're dealing with. However, YouTube does accept 360-degree videos. And if I show you, where's my mouse gone? Now, apologies for the appalling quality of this, because I thought of this about 5 minutes before I was doing a demonstration on an open day. But this is a video that was taken with that camera and just uploaded to YouTube with no editing at all. So if I look on this screen, I'll be able to see it better. Clearly there is sound on here. Yeah. Now, on its own, that's just a bit sort of a novelty on a flat screen. And you go, well, what's the point of that? But the thing which I suddenly realised with this is, number one, I should have put the camera where the students were sitting. So it was recording a student eye view, not sort of in a weird place in the middle of the room. But number two is that YouTube VR is available on these things. Now, I'm now seeing you could record a lecture like that, and if you watched it in this, It would be the equivalent of being in the room because you can look round and see everything. Now, I mean, that was literally recorded, the 19th of March, so a couple of weeks ago. That's as far as I've got with thinking about that. But that seems to me to be a really, really interesting future application. And one of the things I'd encourage you to do is on the headsets, I've loaded the YouTube VR app on there. And you can go into that and just navigate to the 360 videos and have a look and get a sense of the experience of being in one of those 360 videos. I don't know, some of you may have seen it. A year or so ago, there was a documentary produced about a guy who did rock climbing without ropes or anything in Yosemite National Park in America. And some of it was recorded in 360. And I was watching this on one of those headsets, and it's a very disconcerting experience because you're suddenly, I switched it on, I sort of, you know what you do with YouTube, you fast forward into the middle, don't you, just to see what's going on. I suddenly found myself looking at this guy sort of here, climbing up a sheer rock face, which was quite interesting because you can sort of just do this. I then mistakenly looked down, and because I'm suddenly looking at a 500-metre drop, and it was a very, very lifelike experience. Now, that immediately made me go, there's got to be psychology applications for that. All sorts of experiences where you might not be able to put someone in a particular position, suddenly the opportunity to do that there, which I think is intriguing. And stop that. Me explaining something behind myself is a bit distracting. The other thing I think it's probably worth saying at that point about that, because I just think the 360 video thing is very interesting. The other thing, which we really, because as I say, this is the first time we've done this session, so we're sort of just starting off with this, is that clearly we're talking about creating our own content here. We suspect there are going to be a lot of applications that we can use VR for, where there is commercially available software. So, for example, you've probably all seen the sort of driving simulator computer games where you sit in front of a screen, you've got a physical steering wheel and physical pedals. Those things are now moving into VR because clearly, having the screen in front of you, you immediately know it's not a real car. If you've got a VR headset on, you turn your head, you're looking around as if you were in a car. And we're looking at purchasing the hardware bit of that, the steering wheel and the pedals. The software we've already got. But again, you suddenly see potential applications there. The minute you've got a real world driving simulator, you can do all sorts of things. You know, God bless our ethics committee, but they're not going to let us send somebody out driving a car whilst we psychologically experiment on them. But as a very simple example, if you were interested in what distracts people while they're driving, does holding a mobile phone versus having a conversation with someone, what makes you worse when you're driving, do that in VR very easily. And suddenly, you don't need this sort of ridiculous level of equipment and programmers to do it. So, and I suppose what I'm saying with that is that as well as the broad application of this stuff, I think there are interesting areas where it might be really applicable in psychology. And it may be that you don't need to produce your own material. It may be that there are existing apps for these headsets that would work perfectly well for doing it. I mean, for example, we've got a student at the moment who is looking at whether guided meditation in VR and guided meditation in real life has the same effect. Well, that's very easy to do because there are some really good guided meditation apps for VR. So we've got that application for this stuff. So, which brings me fairly nicely to these things. These are, that'll be my camera running out of juice. These are the standard now retail headsets. They're gloriously, you may well know, made by Facebook, who have gloriously now changed their name to Meta, so we all love them now because they've just changed their name. The good news is, although you have to have a Facebook account to use them, don't ask me why, they're all logged into my Facebook account, which I don't use, so Mark Zuckerberg's not actually getting any data, useful data out of us. But I'd encourage you, if nothing else today, just to have a go of these, to give yourself a sense of what they do. Because actually, if you've used one of these even 5 years ago, they've really come on. Now, I'm very deliberately not going to do a this is what button you press doing X, Y, Z with these things, because you'll all know a great deal better than I do that the way we all learn how to use technology is doing that a lot until it does what we want, isn't it? But very briefly with these, there's really a couple of things that I think are worth knowing. Number one is that they set up what it calls a guardian around you. So when you first put it on, what it will do is it will ask you to, it will show you an image of where you are. So these little things on the front are actually cameras. So you'll see a black and white image, and it just says, okay, draw around the free space around you. Now, you can do it stationary and sat down, where you just look round. But equally, in this room, if we weren't all trying to do it at once, which might be a bit dangerous, you could draw out the whole of the floor space, and you can then walk round that whole space. And what happens if you get near the edge, the image it shows you will throw up like almost like a chain fence, so you know not to go past it. But one of the things I found very intriguing about that is that if you're moving in quite a big area, you very, very rapidly lose any sense of where you are in the real world, and you become immersed in whatever it is that you're in. Now, just from a purely psychological perspective, that idea of immersion in these things is really intriguing. And there are other interesting things starting to emerge in the literature of this. It appears that people's perception of time passing is different in VR than in the real world. So literally, if you put somebody in one of these and say, every 5 minutes I want you to tap the top of your head, versus asking them to do something in the real world and say, every 5 minutes I want you to tap the top of your head, their perceptions of 5 minutes will be hugely different. But I think these are really, really intriguing. And as I say, you think £12,000, £350 suddenly becomes something to be considered. The other thing I think probably to talk about, just before I move on to some practicalities, is augmented reality, which is a phrase you've probably heard but might not necessarily have experienced yet. There are already some apps that will do this on your phone. So you hold your phone up, you'll see an image of what you're looking at, and it will overlay information on top of that. Google Maps has started doing it in certain areas. Augmented reality is really, really intriguing. My guess, some of you might know, I'm part of our group that runs cyber psychology teaching here. Paul, my colleague who does it with me, actually did his PhD using virtual reality equipment, so has a bit more of a positive attitude towards VR than I do. My guess is that these things are a transitory technology. These are the things that are going to get us to augmented reality. At the moment, the augmented reality equivalent of these headsets, which you may have seen on the television recently. Actually, there's been a series, I think it was on the BBC, where they were showing people things like scans of the inside of their body in 3D. That's being done with a Microsoft system called HoloLens, where you still have to wear quite an elaborate headset, but rather than looking at a screen, you're looking at the real world with stuff projected in 3D in front of you. The problem is that those HoloLens headsets currently cost £3,500 each, and you need the nerdy computer programmer, my apologies, you need the nerdy computer programmer attached to it to be able to work the bloody thing. So it's not really practical for us at the moment. But equally, many of you will be aware, especially if you're like me and a dreadful Apple user, that Apple are putting an awful lot of money into augmented reality research. There is going to be a point in the not too distant future where, you know, Mr. Chairman of Apple stands up at one of their big presentations one day and goes, okay, I've now decided you're not going to be spending £1,200 for a new phone with me now. You're going to be spending £1,200 to buy a pair of glasses. And those glasses are going to present everything that your phone does in your visual field. At that point, augmented reality is going to explode, and these things will look slightly old-fashioned. But all of the skills that you need to get things into here and to use them are what augmented reality will use. So I think it's well worth, I think, thinking about what you might be able to get out of this stuff now. My guess is that these will still be, there will be very good niche applications for virtual reality all the time. But the augmented reality will be the big commercial area of these things. I mean, for those of you who are interested in it, I mean, it's very intriguing. Facebook have spent literally billions of pounds on developing these, and with very much the suggestion that they're selling these, if not at a loss, at a very small profit in order to get them in the hands of people to use them. How far that goes in the real world, I'm not sure, because they're still not of the fidelity. Somebody who's a big computer gamer is unlikely to use one of these because actually the quality is still not quite good enough. And they'll be using a big sort of PC computer setup. And yet for the casual gamer, are you really going to want to have one of these stuck to your head when actually you can use your phone or in the future your glasses to do it with augmented reality? And equally, the other thing with augmented reality, and some of you may have seen it already, is that for example, a lot of retail companies are starting to do this. IKEA is the one that went into it very early. IKEA do an app where it will you hold your phone up, go, I want to see a Billy bookcase, and it will let you plonk it in your room. So you see a digital rendering of a Billy bookcase in your space. Now, that's clearly got enormous applications. So, having said all that slightly ranty bit, the school's plan for this stuff. So, we've done the first bit, me giving you a bit of a show of what we've got. The next part of that is that we make it available to you. So the plan at the moment is that we'll probably have at least half a day a week where this room is just open and you can say, I want to come and use it. And frankly, with the view that that bottom one is the intriguing bit here, that you are the people who are going to generate what might be the interesting applications for this. Having taught cyber psychology for 3.5 years now, I am well aware of the fact that I, and anybody my age, is the last person to be telling students how they might apply the use of technology. You are going to have a much better idea of what you might be able to do than I am. You could then say to me, could I do this? And I could go, no, that ain't going to work. But actually, I think the idea, it may well be that the best thing here is giving you the technology and go, you tell me. And I think the point, the biggest thing I'd say about that is that, I was going to say some of you, you will have all had over the last 18 months had Microsoft Teams inflicted on it. I don't think contractually I'm allowed to say inflicted, but you know what I mean. Microsoft's big central system that all of that is driven from is a thing called SharePoint. And as you know, essentially every company in the world, and that's not much of an exaggeration, is using some version of Microsoft systems. SharePoint has a virtual reality thing built into it. There's a thing called spaces within SharePoint. And if you've got a SharePoint site, there'll be a thing which says add a space, and it will bring up a 360 thing that you can add videos, you can add text to. The fact that Microsoft are building that into their core products does rather suggest that it's the way the world is going. And strangely enough, I was talking to Paul the other day, who does the other half of the cyber psychology course, and he's got a YouTube channel with loads of short clip videos. And I was saying to him, well, actually, it's interesting because if you look at the way a playlist is presented on YouTube, it's just a list of thumbnails, isn't it? This thing in the Spaces thing in Microsoft just allows you to put, if you've got 10 YouTube videos, you can put 10 YouTube videos on a 360-degree image, which you can scroll left and right. You can add text to each of them to say what they are. You click on the video and it plays. Now, that alone's a really interesting application of that stuff. So, having said all of that, well, actually, that wasn't bad for time. What we're going to do, I'll be around here till 1 o'clock. You're welcome to stay and play with stuff. You're welcome to just go and get yourself a cup of coffee. Don't have to be here till 1 o'clock. If you want to, you're more than welcome to have a go of everything. Each of the desks has got an iPad Pro, a headset, and that's your one, 360-degree camera. There is one difference about the cameras that I should illustrate, and it's quite a good demonstration of how quickly this stuff is evolving. We initially bought one of all of these things. So this was 3 months ago's state of the art, which has to be connected to the app to work. All of the other ones have now got a screen on them. So you just press the shutter button and then you connect it to the app later if you want to. It's actually easier to use using the app, but if you imagine if you were walking around outside, you don't have to have the iPad with you. Just put the thing down, press the shutter, and it takes the picture. So this stuff's improving very quickly. I've put you all on a team site that's just called Psychology VR, which has got a link to all of the instructions for everything. Because frankly, you sitting listening to me tell you how to use computer equipment is the biggest waste of time in the world. There's the usual feedback thing I'll get you to fill in before you go, just so that I've got something to show the school's management. But in terms of doing stuff, that's the URL for getting onto the EON platform. To unlock the iPads, that's the PIN number. You will have set up an account on the EON system, which will be your usual student email address, and then that as your password. Please do change your password at some time, otherwise I'm going to know everybody. Well, it actually doesn't matter that I know everybody's password because I can delete you anyway, but everybody's going to know your password. But at that point, really, feel free to experiment. Have a go with the headsets, have a go with the cameras, look, scan something on the iPads, and hopefully it will just give you a sense of what might be possible. Because my hope is that over the next year, we do a lot of this sort of session, and there's a lot of all of you just having a go with this stuff. And at some point, one of you is going to knock on my office door and go, I've had this idea, and I'm going to retire on the profits of your brilliant idea. Because, this stuff is not about me telling you what to do with it. This stuff is me getting you the stuff and then you working out what to do with it. At that point, thank you very much for listening. A couple of